going to go back to our script. Let's turn this into a remark statement in case we need to test later. Now the temptation is to put the damage right in here, that you've reduced the enemy HP. Problem with that is that doesn't scale well, and you wind up having, if you do that for one skill, you wind up doing that for all the skills. So instead of actually doing the damage right here, we're going to use that variable that we declared earlier, and that's the hero attack power. And we'll say that it's 20. Now, since you've taken your turn, what we need to do is we need to change this. We want battle flow to be changed. Now, when you're changing a variable, you don't need the double equal sign. You only need a single equal sign. And the turn, I'm going to change it to neither. The reason for that is that allows for a processing round between turns. So basically, like what you think of when a heal over time goes into effect, or a damage over time goes into effect, rather than that being part of the enemy turn or part of the hero turn, you set up this extra turn. So to save a little typing, let's just go ahead and copy this. We need to make sure we change this to scale 2. And we want to change how much damage it does. So now what we have to do is we have to check for that state. You don't have to rearrange the brackets like I do. I just find this more visually logical. It's kind of like seeing the whole thing in quotes. And now this is where you actually reduce the enemy HP. And to do that, you use the minus sign, then the equal sign, and then you put in this case, the variable. So what happens is if you use skill 1, hero attack power set to 20, and enemy HP is reduced by that 20. If instead you use skill 2, hero attack power is 50, and hero attack power is reduced by 50. And then what we'll do is, just to make sure this is working, we'll again use a debug.log, and we'll put in for the moment, we'll have to make sure we change this, but just so we can, again for testing purposes, make the turn go back to hero. What we'll do is we will change this after we're done testing to make it be the enemy turn as opposed to back to the hero turn. So we save this. And again, we'll watch down here in the debug log. So if I press 1, it gets reduced because it starts at 0 by 20. Now if I press number 2, as you can see, it's being reduced by 50. So let's go back to our script. Let's give our hero some hit points. Let's give our enemy some hit points. And the idea is, since this is a variable, you could have a skill that changes this variable. So like skill 3 or skill 4 could be a debuff, and it will change enemy defense from say 10 to -20, and so they take even more damage. So first thing we do is we have to change this to enemy. And now we check for an enemy turn. Change it back to hero, and at that point the cycle will be complete. And let's tweak this a little bit. So it has both the enemy HP and hero HP in a single line. And that makes this one really unnecessary. We'll leave it though because we'll test again later when we put in the DOTs. And that should work. Actually, nope, we didn't fix this yet. So, since it's the enemy turn, we're reducing heroes' hit points, but we're not just going to reduce it by the attack amount. We're going to look at the hero's defense. Sorry, this is supposed to be minus equal. And we're subtracting out. We didn't put in any attack power, so let's do that now as well. And so this, by putting the variables in from the very beginning, this scales much, much better, because now you can just change the variables and this statement will still work. So if all goes according to plan, enemy attack power is 30, hero defense is 10. So that actually comes out to a negative. So I think what we'll have to do, in this case we would actually do plus because we're adding a negative. So I pressed the number 1 key, and sure enough, it took off 20 from the hero HP, 20 from the hero HP. So let's do the number 2 key now. Took off 50 there, still takes off 20. Took off 50 there, still takes off 20. So it is working. The alternative is, rather than doing plus, you could keep this as minus if that looks a little bit too strange, and then just flip this. So now you're minusing a positive. We'll run it one more time. So press the number 1 key. Again, you can see it is minusing it by 20, so either one works. You can either add a negative or subtract a positive. Okay. So let's go back to our script, and we're going to add the DOT now. So first thing we have to do is we have to check for that skill. So we'll use skill 3. this case, there won't be any hero attack power. What there will be instead will be the DOT duration, and we will set it to 4. So that is, it'll run 4 turns. And the DOT damage, so it's 20. So let's go back up to our variables and set these to 0. Defaults, we'll save this. Okay, so checks for skill 3, checks that it's the hero's turn, sets the DOT parameters, drops it into the neither turn. So now, the neither turn, we'll put in a if statement. What we're going to do is going to look to see if the DOT duration is greater than 0. Although in coding we have to do it this way, greater than or equal to 1. And then we just so we're subtracting the DOT damage. Now if you notice, we now have 2 separate statements for changing the enemy HP. This can get really complicated, so in this case I am going to use 2 separate statements, one for the single attack, one for the turn-based attacks. You could technically combine them, but it gets really, really messy, so I think that in this case we can keep them separate, because you wind up doing a lot of troubleshooting just to get the calculation right. And so we also want to decrease the duration. So what this does is, once it becomes the neither turn, it reduces the damage like normal, but then it says, okay, if the duration for the DOT is greater than 1, and it will be if you choose this skill because it's set to 4, decrease the duration by 1 because we want it to only run 4 times, 4 rounds, and go ahead and decrease the enemy HP by the DOT damage. Do it. So when we do an attack, if we do this one first, it should minus 20. So actually, just to keep it easier, let's do 30, so it's easy to see which attack is being applied. We'll save it, and we run it. We'll press number 3, and it does reduce by 30, and then we do number 1, number 1, number 1, and there it only reduced by 20 because the duration ended.